Hi. So today I'd like to talk about what are some of the things that make a person identify as FA, forever alone, or incel. I don't mean the definition. I talked about that a little bit before in a different video. I mean, what are some of the factors that make a person be alone, wind up alone? Wind up either wanting sex and not having it, which is kind of the, I guess, common definition for an incel, involuntarily celibate, or someone who wants a relationship and isn't getting it, which is kind of the common definition for FA, forever alone. Keeping in mind there's a lot of overlap between the two. But the definition I use for both is alone and doesn't want to be. So what are some of the things that make a person wind up alone and when they don't want to be? So the first thing I'd like to say is that the qualification of what it means to wind up alone can vary a whole lot. So somebody can be 18, 19, 21 years old and not have had any luck in dating, sex, or relationships and feel like they are incel or they are FA. Somebody can be decades older than that and either not have had any luck or have had very little luck, or still be a virgin, or never have been in a lasting relationship, or have only had a couple of different experiences. And they can be a lot older than that. So there's no, specific age range or number of years that you have to have been alone or sexless in order to identify as FA or incel. Just wanted to put that out there. But again, the definition I use is alone and doesn't want to be. So, and again, I've mentioned this before, but I'm a person who's been single for a large part of my adult life. So I definitely would have liked or would like to be with someone and have not had much success myself. So I totally identify, and that's where my empathy is coming from. It's not coming from the outside, looking in from the outside, but it's coming from identifying from the inside. Okay, so some of the things that contribute to somebody being alone when they don't want to be is that they're a sensitive person. People who are sensitive, who are, don't necessarily have that super thick skin, who tend to feel things deeply, who are intuitive by nature. This can be for a couple of different reasons. It can make it harder for someone to connect, both in a relationship and sexually. In a relationship, it's hard because that person can pick up right away if they don't connect with someone, or if somebody is in some way not kind, not safe to be around. A sensitive person's going to pick up on that right away. They're going to pick up if somebody is not a fit. It doesn't take them a long time to feel that. They may feel it, in a very short period of time. A sensitive person is going to maybe hide their emotions more, be less open because they're protecting themselves, because they're sensitive. Let's see. Look, in general, a sensitive person is going to find it more challenging to find other people who are like themselves, who are sensitive, who are kind, who they can pick up, that they can connect with. And a sensitive person is also going to be, because they don't have that thick skin, they're not going to put themselves out there and risk getting hurt. Even if all they just want is a sexual encounter, say, for example, if they're a virgin or they just want to be with somebody and have sex, a sensitive person is not just going to brashly put themselves out there and take their lumps if they get rejected, because a sensitive hurt person is going to feel it more deeply. Another related attribute, and by the way, this is a list, and anybody can have any number, any fewer or greater number of things from this list, and there may be things that are forgotten that are not on this list, and leave them in the comments. Another is that a person can be risk averse. Somebody isn't comfortable taking risks, and this is connected with being a sensitive person. There are people who will put themselves out there, risk getting rejected, do it again and again. And there are some people that, that's just not their nature. Look, there are some people who like to go bungee jumping. There's some people who like to go jumping out of planes with parachutes. And some people like roller coasters. And there are people who don't get their jollies out of that kind of thing, okay? Similarly, when it comes to emotional or social things, there are people who are risk averse. They don't like putting themselves into situations where they could be quite easily or likely rejected. Okay, another thing that, and you're going to see a lot of these things are related one to the other. Another thing that is common with people who have trouble finding someone, that's a nice way to put it, trouble finding someone, trouble connecting for relationships or for sex, is that, or sex in relationships, is that they are people who may be more introspective. They live in the world of the mind. They think a lot. They examine themselves. They think about the world around them. Somebody who's spending a lot of time in the world of the mind is going to find it harder to connect with people who are not like that. That's a nice way to put it. There's nothing right or wrong about different kinds of people. But if you're from Paris and you meet someone from China, and the Chinese person speaks only Chinese and is culturally Chinese, and you speak only French and you're culturally French, it's going to be harder to connect with that person. Somebody who is introspective and lives in the world of the mind, if they are around people who are not that way, who focus on material things or who focus on social banter, it's going to be like two people who speak two different languages, and it's going to be difficult to connect. So introspective people tend to connect with people who are like themselves, and that may not be a lot of people out there. Another thing that can lead someone to be alone, to find it difficult to find people to connect with, is someone who's I'm not going to say smart. This is connected to introspection, by the way. Somebody who is analytical and maybe somewhat intellectual by nature, I guess what you might call, you could call it nerdy maybe a little bit. Somebody who lives in the world of ideas. Okay, so this is similar, but somebody who lives in the world of ideas. So somebody who has a certain type of analytical or intellectual intelligence, and I don't mean intellectual in the sense of using big fancy words, not at all. But I do mean somebody who examines ideas, and that's something that comes naturally to them, is going to find it hard to find people that are like them, who also think deeply about things and live in the world of ideas. And again, this is connected to being introspective. Introspective is the inner world of the self. I would say analytical / intellectual is the world of ideas. So they're connected. So another thing that can make it hard is if somebody is a little bit individualistic, non-conforming, just goes to the beat of their own drum. I don't mean this in a self-conscious way of somebody who's going out of their way to be quirky or going out of their way to be different. There are people who just naturally they're not naturally a blending in kind of member of the flock. there is something individualistic about them, or they're naturally a bit non-conforming. And this may not be a conscious choice on their part. This may just be naturally the way they are. That's naturally the way I am. And I don't consciously choose that. And there are times that I wish I didn't, have that air of being somebody different and not part of the herd or not part of the flock. There are times where it would have been a lot easier for me to just blend in, but it's not something that I can control. It's you can try to blend in the best you can and look like everybody else, but people will pick up that you're a bit nonconformist, individualistic, march to the beat of your own drum. It's just who you are. So somebody who is like that, and it can be a great thing, but it can also make it tough for someone both to blend in socially and to find someone to connect with, to find people to connect with. Let's see. So connected to that, connected to being an individualist or a bit of a nonconformist, is people who are loners. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and some of them will be further on, down the things that I'm going to mention. But for whatever the reason, some people are loners. And that is going to make it more of a challenge for them to blend in social situations, to connect with people who aren't loners, to find people who are like themselves, to feel comfortable with others. So being a loner makes it tough, and being a bit of a hermit makes it tough. That's connected to being a loner, because you're just going to be around people less. So it's going to be harder to connect with people. It's going to be harder to find people to connect with. But if you are a bit of a loner or a hermit, and I certainly am, that's not something you really can control completely. Okay. People who have some level of anxiety or depression, and that can be for any number of reasons. It can be genetic. It can be because of difficult experiences that they've had. Somebody who has some level of anxiety or depression, number one, they're going to be more self-critical, because that's going to be one of the ways that their anxiety is going to manifest. And the other thing is they're going to be very self-protective. They're going to avoid situations that might make them feel bad or make them feel worse. They're going to become hopeless or disappointed or sad more easily when things don't work out. And, that's a tough place to be. So, and it's certainly something I understand. I'm a sensitive and definitely can be moody person. So again, I'm not speaking about this from the outside in. I'm speaking about it from the inside in. Okay. The other thing that can make it tough for somebody is external difficulties with getting a good job, difficulties with money. All of these things can make a person stressed. They can make a person have less resources. They can make a person withdraw. They can make a person be less social, because A, they're stressed, and B, they don't have money to spend on doing fun things. So, and they can make a person, did I say that they can make a person self-critical? So external difficulties. Another big one is having a difficult personal history. And this is connected to what I said about people being loners, people being anxious or having issues with depression. Maybe people have had difficult childhoods, difficult relations with family. Maybe they were mistreated, maybe they were abused in some way. Maybe they were neglected, weren't loved. And I sound very blithe when I'm talking about this, just because I'm trying to cover a whole bunch of things. But believe me, as somebody who's been through my own challenges, I'm saying this with a lot of understanding. And if anything, I'm not being super, gushy and emotional about it, because I have been through those things and I do understand them. So difficult personal history. Another thing that can make it really tough for people is having had experiences of social or geographical disconnection, like changing schools a bunch of times, or even changing schools at a critical moment, family moving, getting uprooted geographically, having situations where relationships and social ties got broken off, got uprooted, got disconnected, and it was hard to find new ones, and it was hard to connect with people again once those, if your connections with people have been broken at critical times, it's harder to find new people, and it's also harder to reconnect. It just becomes tough. People withdraw. Another thing is a lack of social or family supports. So this is in two ways. Number one, because having a social network and family supports, community supports, can make a person more emotionally more resilient, but also it can be a source of meeting people, being connected with people, being set up with people, being fixed up with people, whether it's a community that does it, or a church or synagogue that does it, or your family that supports you and encourages you, or your social network where you have friends of friends, who introduce you to people. So having a lack of those supports takes away your internal resources, and it also just simply, it gives you less help, and it simply puts you around less people. Okay. So, and by the way, one of the good things about the fact that I'm saying all of these different things is because I've noticed that there are people who put all of their what's the word? They blame, I don't like that word, but they blame all of their difficulty in being alone on one thing or on two things. And so some of the things that I'm going to mention, somebody will say, oh yeah, that's the reason. And I guess what I'm looking to say is no, that there could be a lot of reasons, and it's complex. So the reason I'm about to say is one that people tend to focus on a lot, and that is some kind of physical disadvantage. And yes, it definitely doesn't help if somebody isn't conventionally good looking, conventionally attractive, conventionally beautiful, or if they have some sort of physical issue. It can be any number of things. I don't have to list it, it doesn't make it easier, but it's one in a list of things, because we all know people who are not conventionally attractive or have some kind of issue, and yet they're still in a relationship. Okay, I don't know if they're getting hookup sex all the time, because that does tend to weigh more towards people who have conventional attractiveness, or at least who don't have some big disadvantage. But they may be able to find a relationship. So it's not just being conventionally not as attractive, but that can definitely be one of the things. And it can definitely be something that will impact a person's confidence. So it doesn't have to objectively be an issue, because that same person who's not conventionally good looking could still go out and maybe find a relationship or find a sexual encounter. I'd say more likely a relationship. But their own view of themselves becomes self-critical, because they don't see themselves as being conventionally attractive. By the way, it could be all in their heads. There are people who are okay looking, decent looking, sometimes even nice looking, who think that they are bad looking. But let's just say that somebody is objectively not conventionally attractive. That's going to make it harder for them, not just because objectively it might make it harder, but also because it's going to impact their confidence. The same goes for people who are chronologically disadvantaged. This can be people who are young and, like they say, wet behind the ears. More commonly, it's people who are over a certain age. And for a lot of reasons, this can be a disadvantage as well, absolutely. And by the way, when I said physically not conventionally attractive, that can be any number of things. It can be weight issues, it can be height, it can be, somebody who has acne, it can be somebody who just has not conventional features in their own point of view or objectively. So it can be any number of things. It's a very broad category. So age disadvantage, somebody who's over a certain age, a guy who's over a certain age, very commonly women who are over a certain age, who feel that they are competing with people who are much younger than they are, or anything that makes a person feel insecure because of age. That can be with men and definitely commonly with women. So chronological disadvantage. Let's see. Okay, here's a biggie, and this is one that I'd like to emphasize because I think it doesn't get emphasized enough. And that is people who have less common personality types. Okay, I'm not a big Myers-Briggs groupie. I'm just using this, and you can Google it up if you're not familiar. I'm just using this because I think it's useful. So there are two Myers-Briggs personality types. One is an INFJ, which stands for introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. And basically it means somebody who is more introspective, more intuitive, more emotional, but still very focused and analytical. They're not flaky. And people who are INFJs tend to be very sensitive people, very in tune with what's around them, very intuitive, sometimes self-protective, interested in helping others, but not always finding it easy to connect with others for their own sake. They'll connect with people to help them, but in terms of a deep connection for themselves, for friendship or for romance, it's hard for them because there just aren't that many people like them. So INFJs account for 1% of the population. And there's a lot on Google about INFJ, not on Google, on YouTube. So some of which obviously is nonsense, but there's good stuff there too. And the other personality type is INTJ, also introverted, also intuitive, but instead of being highly emotional, they're highly analytical. And also judging means they're not flaky, they're very focused. So the INTJs would be like the scientist types, the analytical types. That's supposedly about 2% of the population. So the INFJs and the INTJs are just not that common. And they tend to be very sensitive and nerdy and a little bit introspective, tend to be loners, and numerically, there just isn't a lot of them out there. And they tend to deeply connect for friendship or romance with people like themselves. So it just isn't easy for one to find someone like them. Okay, I like that not because I'm a big, not because I'm a big believer in Myers-Briggs as an objective personality test, but because it emphasizes the fact that some of us just have wonderful, precious, beautiful personalities that are just not that common. So we find it hard to find people like us, and it's just a numerical thing, and that's something that I relate to very much. Okay, other personality issues. Boy, this is going to be a long video. Hope it's not too long, but the list is long. Other personality issues, somebody who's a little bit Aspy, a little bit Asperger's. I know that term has fallen out of favor, but guess what? I still like it. People who have difficulty reading and understanding social cues with the same facility, same ease as other people. So they're a little Aspy, maybe a little ADD, just personality stuff, personality quirks. And that's not everybody, but it can also be a factor in finding someone who is like you or like me. Okay, what else? Somebody who's shy. There can be a lot of reasons for shyness, for being shy or reserved, but it can be social anxiety, it can just be personality, but shyness, it's going to make it harder, particularly for guys, but also for women. It's going to make them harder to find somebody, harder to connect. Let's see. Being self-critical. And there are a lot of reasons, and a lot of them fall into, what we said before, somebody who maybe has had difficult experiences, difficult family history, maybe hasn't always been treated well, whatever it is, maybe is a little anxious, they become self-critical. And somebody who's self-critical is going to judge themselves more harshly and going to have less internal emotional energy, less internal emotional resources, because they beat up on themselves a little bit, which is not good. And also any experiences they have, they're going to judge themselves, or they're not going to approach people because they'll say, that person wouldn't want to be with me. They're self-critical. Somebody who has been bullied, okay, somebody where the criticism or the lack of good treatment has come from their peers, from outside of them. So it's not just that they're self-critical, but they've gotten it from other people outside of them. That can definitely make somebody be more introspective, more introverted, more self-critical, more anxious, and alone. Okay, a couple of more things. A history of lack of success in the past. So they have tried and haven't had successful experiences. And this could particularly be somebody who's tried when they were young, or tried when they were in high school, or tried when they were in college, didn't have successes, and by the time they're out in the world as an adult, they already have that in their roster of experiences that they tried to connect with the opposite sex and it didn't work out. So that's kind of their imprint in their mind of tried this and it just didn't work. And closely connected to that is a history of being rejected. So not just a lack of success, but also experiences of rejection with the opposite sex, or it could be the same sex if they're gay. And let's see. One last thing. And boy, I'm sure we can add to this list. I'm sure there are things that I've forgotten, but I'm going to add one last thing. And that is that there are men, a good number of men, and I would say a slight majority of women who are what I would call attachment based. And that's not my term, actually. Somebody else thought of that word. And what it means is that they experience love and sexuality and intimacy. That's their goal. They're not looking for casual sex. And I spoke about this in a different video that I did called Why I Hate the Term Demisexual. And really because I think the correct term is intimisexual. So it's not that these people have any lower of a sex drive, but they experience their sexuality most satisfyingly in an intimate context. For a man, it could be that that's what he wants, that is what that's what is most precious to him. And for women, it can actually be a question they simply physically don't respond sexually unless they're in an intimate relationship. So somebody who is, back to the word attachment based, looking for an attachment, a relationship, a connection, instead of just casual sex, is going to have a harder time for a bunch of different reasons. For a guy, they may find it harder to relate to their peers who are talking about all the hookup sex that they want to have. For a woman, it can be harder for her because even though for women it may be easier to find someone who just wants to have sex with them, that may be something that she doesn't enjoy at all physically. And from what I've seen, it's about the studies I saw, it was like about 60% of women don't respond sexually in a hookup situation. So a whole range of things that might be available to them if they liked hookups, particularly for females where getting a hookup might be easier, it's not going to work for them because they don't enjoy it. And for a guy, and by the way, this can lead to self-criticism on behalf of the woman. She thinks I should enjoy it. She doesn't realize a lot of people don't enjoy it, don't enjoy hookup sex, particularly a lot of women. Or it can lead to people putting themselves in situations that they feel bad about afterwards. It's a negative experience, but they think that everybody likes it, so they should like it. And particularly for women, that can be really tough. For guys, It's tough for a different reason, because they may be surrounded by guys who all do enjoy hookup sex, and while a guy might be able to have an erection or have an orgasm, but it doesn't mean that that's what they really want. If they are really truly kind of attachment based, casual sex they may be able to perform, but it's going to feel very empty and unsatisfying to them. So, and this can affect people who are conventionally attractive, males and females, just because it's just something that other people are pursuing and they don't really want. And particularly for a female, she may not physically even enjoy it at all. So if you are attachment based, if you're looking for a relationship, if you are an demisexual, it just is that much harder, because you're looking for something, a real relationship, a real connection with someone, and that's just hard to find. Okay, so gosh, this has been a lot of different factors, and check off the ones that apply to you. My goal is that people see that it's complex, that there can be a lot of different factors, that a lot of these are not related to it being anybody's fault. A lot of these are not even related to whether somebody is quote unquote good looking enough. It's tough. It's tough to be alone when you don't want to be. And my heart goes out to all of the FAs and incels out there. And I definitely, I definitely relate to whatever extent. I don't have all the things on the list, but I definitely have a bunch of them. And I know and I hope that you all see yourselves somewhere in this list of factors, and be kind to yourself, be understanding. And also, I'm going to end with this thought. Appreciate the things about yourself that are precious, even if it makes it harder for you to connect with the general population out there. But some of the things that make you you are absolutely precious, and they will make you more sensitive and more compassionate to others who also are going through difficulties. And I know it's not what we choose. Everybody would like to be with someone, not be FA, not be incel, be not alone. But definitely see yourself as precious and use that to be kind and compassionate to others. And here's hoping that everyone out there finds someone to be with, whether it's friendships or relationships or sex or connection. Okay, thanks.